You are not alone. Welcome to the Clark and Linda Show.
This is our real relationship, experiencing change after addiction and betrayal.
We're learning to connect to feel safe and confident in marriage.
And you can too.
'Cause I believe in you.
Welcome to another episode of the Clark and Linda Show. It's good to be back in the studio. And today we are talking about telling your kids, part of our ongoing series about telling people, right? It's kind of just happened inadvertently. I don't know that we even did this on purpose. We're going to pretend like we did. But there's a lot of sharing going on, a lot of tips about sharing. Some of them might be a little bit redundant, but we think that there's some good stuff, and we think it's awesome to share. So today we're going to talk about sharing with your kids, and when we did it, I was partially inspired by this book, 10 Powerful Things to Say to Your Kids by Paul Axtell. And one of the things that he says is powerful to say to your kids is, I make mistakes too, which was hard to admit. I wanted my kids to think I'm perfect. And so, telling them that I did this awful thing was really tough. But he says, another part of being accessible to your kids when problems arise is a willingness to be vulnerable yourself, to acknowledge that you don't have all the answers, that you make mistakes, and that you are still working on getting better at dealing with various parts of life. And I think that is true, It's okay for kids to see that you're human, and, it can help you to accept when they make when they make mistakes, or problems. They make problems too, let's be honest. But it can also help them to know that you're not perfect. On the next page, he says, I believe the challenge of growing up would be easier if your kids knew that good people sometimes make mistakes or sometimes act in ways that are not acceptable. This is not so they have the freedom to be bad. Rather, this ensures they don't compound a mistake by beating themselves up for not being perfect or not meeting your expectations, or by thinking you are disappointed in them or don't love them anymore. Right? So it just kind of helps open up those conversations and allows you to have deeper, more meaningful talks about their mistakes, because they understand that you make mistakes too, and that you've had some experience, and you might be able to help them when they go through hard things. So with that intro to today's topic, I'm going to turn the time over to Linda for her prepared stuff about...
Prepared? Let's not give it that title.
You've got a whole iPad here full of notes, and I'm flying free tonight. No notes. I'm just going to shoot from the hip and talk about what I remember from when we told the kids.
Yeah.
But,
cool. So I totally love that book too. And that was the book that kind of warmed me up to the idea, right? But I'm going to be honest, it was hard to figure out how to tell the kids, because we weren't sure what order we needed to go in, and we didn't want to bombard them with a bunch of stress or anxiety or things, or invent things that they didn't even think about yet.
Yeah, so, we definitely didn't want to make them curious about what's this thing that Dad has done, and
right, nobody needs to look that stuff up on their free time.
Yeah.
And so I remember just without knowing, or I remember them without knowing what was going on after D-Day, they had started praying that we would stay together. Please bless Mom and Dad that they'll stay together, or please bless our family that we'll stay together forever. And it was so weird, because we were like, how do they know there's something wrong? We didn't tell them anything, but they could just feel a difference in our home. And I think that sometimes we think as parents, as long as we don't tell them that, they're going to be fine, and we're going to spare them, their whatever we think we're sparing them from. And in the end, they're the first ones that are going to notice something, because they're in the family and they're with us and they know what's going on. Now, we chose to not have a separation, so we were still in the home together. And so they could definitely feel there was a difference. Now, if there's families out there that have to, or couples out there that have to be separated for one reason or another to, help with healing, then there's, going to be even more questions, I'm sure, from the kids. And so, yeah, with our kids just kind of saying those kinds of prayers, we felt like we needed to tell them sooner rather than later too, because we didn't want them to continue to worry so much. We were already worried, but we didn't want them to really worry, right? And when kids worry, I feel like because they haven't lived life as long as we have, they see things as doom and gloom, forever, things are going to be bad, something's bad's going to happen. And yeah, so they were saying prayers to help our family stay together, which was very hard for us to hear, but also really comforting to know that they cared enough to pray for us to stay together. And so that really meant a lot. That they were sensitive enough to know that they needed to pray for us, for our family, because it's important. And the fact that they wanted us to stay together also showed that they cared about us. And so yeah, so that was good. So before we shared with them, we talked about, or I didn't want to just go out and say stuff. And we've talked about it in the past where I was the one really gung-ho about sharing with a lot of people. And I was like, let's just tell everybody, and as soon as possible. But I knew that with our kids, I didn't want to be talking about Dad. And because that just didn't feel right to share what he's going through without him being there or while he's there, sharing it in a third person kind of thing. And so I didn't feel that was right. And so I remember talking with you about hey, what, how are we going to share with the kids? And, what do you think we need to do? And stuff like that. But I had already gone through in my mind, all of the things that we need to share and things that I thought would be really awesome. And I was hoping that you would be on board with that and but I didn't want to tell you all those things. I wanted you to come up with them on your own. I didn't just want to be here's the checklist, this is what we're going to talk about. And so I think just kind of gave you a starting point. I think I recommended the book to you and said, look, it's not too bad, but
Well,
maybe...
and again, I think it was one of the things that we talked about from the very beginning. It wasn't this one was a surprise.
But I had specific things. I have 7 things listed here that I was okay, this is the stuff we need to cover, but I don't want to tell him that these are the things we need to cover. It's the subtle way.
I don't know why. I think we've gotten better now at
right.
communicating.
We are much better.
This is our plan, but it was still one of those times where we were both a little sensitive about what could be said, and we don't want to hurt each other's feelings. And now we just open up. We're okay, here's the plan. Let's do this.
Yeah.
But
so these are some of the things that I thought for sure we needed to share. And you can chime in with thoughts and things. Okay. So I wanted them to know that they are loved and that we were choosing to stay together. And so I do remember sharing after I had made the choice, at least for myself, to know that I wanted to try and figure things out, that I wanted to wait and see, that I wanted to stay until, TBD, So that was number one, that I was I wanted, once I made that choice, I did want them to know that we were going to work towards staying together. So do you have any thoughts on that?
No.
Okay.
I'll jump in if I have thoughts.
Okay.
Don't worry.
Okay.
I'm not shy about interrupting.
And then I also thought, that they needed to be familiar with what we were talking about, at least on the surface, but not be firsthand experience know what an addiction to pornography is. And so a book that we had is, and I think we shared it in the resources episodes, where it talks about, it's titled Good Pictures, Bad Pictures. And it's really great book. You go through from the front to the back, just like every week you can review it with your kids, or every day at dinner, or however often you feel, to get through the entire thing. And then at the end there's like a commitment to have them make a commitment to not look at bad pictures, but if they do, then they like identify it. And anyway, so it's a really good book to kind of help understand like what addiction is, and what good pictures are, and what bad pictures are. So I do remember we've reviewed that book in the past.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. One of the nice things is we had like a whole series of family home evenings where for I think over the course of like 6 weeks we went over that book pretty deep and did kind of like little exercises with them and stuff like that, where we just were helping them get to know that stuff and reviewing it with them, and so it wasn't like this was the first conversation we'd ever had about pornography with them. We'd talked about it before, and so that gave us kind of a starting point because of those talks that we'd already had.
Yeah. And I think that definitely helped, but I also think we hadn't talked about it in a little bit, so we were like, we
did some
to review a little bit before we just...
Which was also kind of eye-opening, right? Yeah. Like, I think you hear all the time, like, oh, you can't just talk about this once and assume. You need to talk about it regularly with your kids. And this was, like, a really good testimony of that, right? Because we started bringing up this stuff, and we kind of figured, like, oh, yeah, they'll know all this, and... They remember, like, once we really started getting into it, there was, like, a few things they started remembering, but starting out, they didn't remember any of it.
Yeah, and at the time, our kids were 9 and 4, right, when we disclosed to them. So now they're just a year older, but that's the ages of our boys, so, I mean, it's going to be different for everybody.
Yeah,
so.
But it was, as part of disclosing to them, we definitely spent some time reviewing that book and kind of reestablishing what is pornography and why is it bad and how does it affect your brain and a lot of those things. So,
and I think that helped. Mm-hmm. And then the next thing is that, kind of like what he was reading at the beginning, where we aren't perfect, even though it would be nice for us to be perfect, that we're not perfect. And in fact, just the other day, our oldest and I, we take turns driving him to school in the morning, and we had a conversation in the car, just, talking about how, even Jesus Christ didn't say he was perfect before he was resurrected. And he was like, wait, what? He didn't say he was perfect? Like, our 10-year-old did not think that that's what Christ thought of himself.
I'm not saying that he wasn't, but he didn't make those claims
but like Christ even didn't consider himself perfect before he was resurrected. And we think he is because he is, but...
Yeah, I think what you're referring to is in the New Testament, he says, "Be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect."
Right.
And then after... when he goes to visit the Nephites, he says, "Be ye therefore perfect, even as I am perfect," right?
Yeah. And so exactly, like, and he was just shocked, like, that even Jesus Christ didn't call himself perfect. And so I think it's just a nice reminder to let the kids know that, hey, you know what? All adults are not perfect. We all make mistakes, and it's okay to make mistakes, so that when they make mistakes, they're not so hard on themselves and they don't beat themselves up, because that's something that, the adversary, I'm sure, is going to try and make them feel shame or inadequate in some way. So that was important too. And then how to say that you're sorry. There's so many times that we teach our kids all these, things about making mistakes and how to make things right, and then saying you're sorry and what you can do for restitution and stuff like that. And and we expect them to do it, but we don't expect ourselves to do it, and sometimes, as a mom, even I make mistakes, and, I'll forget to say that I'm sorry just because I expect them to know that I'm not perfect, well, you knew that mom was not reliable, so that's your bad, but, but that's not how it works, and so trying to teach them the proper, way to apologize and to make things right. And so that just kind of helped reinforce the things that we're already teaching them to do is something that we can do as adults. And it wasn't like a pick on dad session. So it might sound like it was, but I think it was really well done. And I think the boys received it well.
We definitely approached it with a lot of prayer beforehand.
Yeah.
I know for one, it was very humbling, and I was very nervous about it. So I definitely think that helped. I remember that I felt the Spirit there, and I think that is kind of the key to it. You could probably screw up just about everything else, but if you have the Spirit there, it's going to help make everything go well, and it's going to communicate the message that needs to be communicated for you.
Yeah. You're right. And we talk about that in the previous episodes too, about sharing how, it might not come out right, and it might not be the perfect time, and it's never going to be right, but you're always going to know if it went well, if you can feel the Spirit.
Yeah.
Then something else was to identify the enemy, because while we could point fingers, at who did what and, the choices that were made. In the end, it was Satan who is tempting us and who is trying to break our family apart, and who could easily, tempt me to do stuff or tempt, our boys to do some things. And so to identify that you're not the bad guy, but that Satan is the bad guy. And so trying to get those anger feelings pointed to the right direction was important for me to make sure that they weren't, trying to, well, especially at school, I think sometimes at school, like, kids will talk about random things, and, you don't want kids saying stuff like, hey, well, my dad watches pornography, or, he's mean, or he did this, and so just pointing them to the right direction of.
But in a way, I mean, yes, we did want to identify the enemy and make them aware, but also I was clear that the responsibility was still mine, right?
Yeah.
That I made the mistake. We didn't want to set up Satan as like this fall guy who you can just blame for anything that you happen to do wrong, right? It wasn't like, oh yeah, anytime you screw up in your life, it's Satan's fault, right? I mean, we talked about his desire to lead us astray and all of the things that he does to tempt us, and how sometimes it is difficult to face those temptations. But I think that we were careful to make sure that it wasn't like blaming Satan for all of our problems and all of our mistakes, because we do want them to learn to take responsibility for their own actions. So it was try to walk that fine line of helping them understand, like, yes, there is, a power out there that wants to lead you astray and that is trying to keep you off track. But we also did talk about all the help that's available to us, and all of the tools that God provides, and all of the angels that are there to protect us, and how ultimately, we do have the power within us to make right choices and to do what's right. And I think that was an important part of the discussion as well.
Oh yeah, that was my next one.
Oh, sorry.
Christ is the one who provides that healing for us. And that was, although it's towards the bottom of the list, that's technically the first person we go to when we need that healing. And that we wanted to make sure the boys knew that that's how we can get through life and through our mistakes and through our problems, is with God's help and through Jesus Christ, and that we can't have an eternal family without their help, and that they desire us to have an eternal family as well. So those were the top things that I, was thinking about before we ended up, doing our disclosure to the boys. You said something, though, that reminded me of something that I didn't write down, and I can't remember what it is now.
Sorry.
But
Hopefully it'll come back to you.
Yeah, it was something you mentioned, and I was like, oh, I should say that too, but that's okay. Yeah,
Okay.
It'll come back to me. So, what were some of the things that you were thinking of?
Some of the things I thought of, this was, of all of the disclosures we've talked about, friends and all the different family and stuff, this was definitely the hardest. After D-Day, I should say. This is definitely the hardest after D-Day. And I guess it just goes, like your immediate family are the ones that you care about the most. And I just look at those innocent little boys and think, like I always kind of feel like they're young enough, like at some point in time, kids turn into teenagers and then they don't want anything to do with their parents. But for a long time, my boys have always wanted, if there was something that I was doing, they wanted to do it too. And, they always want to hang out with dad, and, they always want whatever dad has. If I get a new pocket knife, they want a pocket knife, and I have a flashlight, they want to have a flashlight. And I just had this fear that I was going to ruin that, right? That they were no longer going to look up to dad. And this one was really scary. It took, when I say I prayed a lot, it took a lot of prayer to have the courage to talk to them about it. And it's funny because those lessons where we talked about pornography, I can remember going back even before to when we were doing those lessons. And at the time, I was still struggling with pornography. And so even those were like this source of terrible shame for me. Because on the one hand, yes, I knew how awful it was to be caught in that. And the last thing I wanted for my boys was to have to go through what I was going through, right? Of leading that double life and telling those lies and feeling that filthy darkness eat up your soul. And so, yeah, I wanted to have those family home evenings. But as we were talking about it, man, you just feel like a huge hypocrite, right? And it was really hard to go through those. And so I just remember, like always thinking to myself, well, it's worth going through this hypocrisy so that they can learn to avoid it. And we have to have these family home evenings, and maybe they can escape what I've had to go through. And so as I prepared for this, I started shifting my thinking of, maybe by telling them about this and having them see somebody who maybe they did look up to so much that even that person could get caught. Maybe it helps them understand just how serious this is and how much they need to be ready for it and prepared against it. And so it was a blessing that we could fall back on some of those teachings. And I do remember it was really helpful to go through the good pictures, bad pictures. I mean, that was a great way to start the conversation, is to get us talking about, what is this and what is it bad? And then when we finally got to the point of where I came out and told them, I just remember how amazing they were. And they looked at me and they said, "It's okay, Dad. We love you anyway. We'll always love you." And they just were so supportive, There was never, they had questions, but I think they almost looked at me like, "Oh, if you thought this would change the way we feel about you, you're crazy. You're our dad, and we love you." And they still look up to me, and they still want to do what I'm doing, and they still want to spend time with dad and want to wrestle, and they're always coming to me. And I've been working from home, and sometimes it's almost hard to get work done because Faust wants to come and show me every Lego thing that he builds and talk to me about all of his stuffed animals and the fort that he just built for him. And he's a little chatterbox and wants my attention all the time, and sometimes I have to remind him, "Hey, Dad's working." But it hasn't changed that. All right, we had to do a quick break, and now we're back. We may have lost a little bit of the emotion, but long story short is that just like all of the other disclosures, it ended up being a really positive experience. And I think a lot of good has come out of it. And we go back and revisit the subject regularly now. In fact, we've had some other books that we've gone through. You want to talk about those probably after homework?
No, I was actually going to say that Clark tells them when he has meetings to go to, and the boys, they encourage him like, "Oh, good job, Dad," or, "That's awesome," or they'll ask him like, "When's your meeting?" And and they know that Dad's going to help strengthen his armor when he goes to those meetings. And same thing with me. I've been able to share with them that I get certain emotions and feelings that I have to work out, and so I have phone calls that I do as well. But my meetings are from home with the Worth group from that Life Changing Services that we always recommend. So it's definitely helpful when you can, share things like that with your kids so that they know that, hey, we're actively working on our healing and recovery, and that's okay, and that's good.
And it's really opened up a lot of other conversations, right? Like they are okay talking about those things and other things as well. And, they've also started learning to recognize how Satan tries to work on us a little bit, not just with pornography, but with other things. Our 5-year-old is super cute. Sometimes he'll be like, "I think that's Satan," and he always wants to say it like he's some sort of super villain, which he is, right?
For sure.
And I can't remember if I told this story on the podcast or not, but I'm going to retell it. I know I've told it a couple times, but it was really funny too because I think the next day after we'd had this, we did it for a family home evening, and Finn was at school, and I think Linda was out at the store, and so I was fixing lunch for me and Faust, and we sat down to eat lunch, and I was sitting across from him on the table, and he just kind of gets this serious look on his face, and he was like, "Hey, Dad, what's that thing called again with the naked people, the naked pictures?" And I was like, "Do you mean pornography?" "Yeah." "Should we talk about that?" And I was like, "Sure, we can talk about that if you want to." He was like, "I think we should. You go first." And he was just like, it was like he was this little counselor, it was like, "Tell me how you feel about this and what are you going through?" And he's clearly very concerned and wanted to be helpful, and we had told him, "Hey, we don't want to keep these things in the dark. We want to talk about them and have open conversations, and if you ever have questions, let us know." But I think he had felt like, it was his assignment that he needed to talk to Dad about him because that would help, or talk to Dad about it because that would help. And so it was just really cute. But yeah, it was a great experience, and I feel like it's really helped us start to prepare our boys. And one of the things we've told them is that they, in the day and age that we live in, we've told them they will see pornography at some point. It's not an if, it's just when. And, they know that they should avoid it. They really want to avoid it. But I think that we've prepared them so that when it happens, they'll come talk to us. And we've already had, they've come to us about certain things where, this person was immodest, or we saw this show and these people were kissing, and what's that all about? And so there's already started to be some conversations, and I think it's really helpful. And I think the only way that you can porn-proof your kids is to start to have these open conversations and let them know that there isn't shame in seeing these things, and that there is a way to get through it and to get over it, and to not have it negatively affect your life. And so it's been great.
Yep.
Homework?
It has been. Homework. Okay, so every family is different. And one last thing that I did want to say was for Finn, I remember Finn coming up and talking to me about, or talking to us, maybe it was at the same time during D-Day, but for them, that he was concerned, like if he needed to check up on Dad. And I remembered like the stress that he was feeling, like, okay, so do I need to check on him? And, I'll make sure that his computer's always, doing good, and like that he won't look at stuff, and I'll make sure, he put that responsibility on himself. And I was like, whoa, that is not
It wasn't
what
just
we
Finn.
want.
You remember Faust was also like, I'm going to spy on Dad.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to be like Spider-Man. I'll crawl on the ceiling and then I'll come down and I'll catch him if he's trying to do it. And he like had all these cute ideas of he was going to be some superhero spy that was going to be checking in on me and making sure. And yeah, I think
we had to definitely put a stop to that, because we did not want them to feel at all responsible for choices that he made, or even choices that I make, and just like, we make our own choices, and if Dad does choose to do that again, it is not their fault, and it is not in any way their responsibility to keep tabs on what Dad's doing. Poor kids. Like,
it was really sweet. The desire that they had
would be
to
on like a child, would be so crazy. So
it was a sweet sentiment that they wanted to help, and that they wanted to protect Dad from this evil. But yeah, I think it was an important part of the conversation to make sure that they knew that they didn't bear any responsibility for it.
Yeah.
And they didn't have to worry about trying to stop that for me, but that they did have to be vigilant to stop it in their own lives, right? Yeah. And so, yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. So make sure you do address that with the kids. And then homework. So think about the ages and stages of your kids and like what they have experienced through their life so far, because that will help you understand where they're at, for, being able to receive this kind of information and figure out how to process it. If you have like a therapist like that you're already going to, ask your therapist how they think you could go about it. So I know that I asked our group therapist for advice and things like that, and she gave some pointers and things. So they know, because they've gone through multiple people who have gone through this, so they have maybe some inside tips on other things that might be helpful for kids. Make a plan. So before just blurting stuff out to them. Although it might feel good to you to get it off your chest, it might seem really confusing to them. So make sure you have a plan in place of like the steps that you're going to go through to share, and then, any questions that you might have, because I did not see that one coming from Finn. I didn't know that he was going to try or Faust, that they were going to try and spy on Dad, like as if that's like now our goal. We just all spy on Dad, and we just, and while as the betrayed, that is totally something that I've done in the past. I can't say that I've never done that. But that's not where the healing comes, like going after, something and you don't know what, and just like searching and finding. It's just, I can't remember what it's called. Ruminating, maybe? Or I can't remember what it's called, but there's something that it's called something when the betrayed is going like searching for some evidence, or what are they doing, and checking up on them and stuff like that. That is not where the healing comes from. So to not focus on that. So that was, so don't let your kids focus on it either. And then as you figure out the stages and ages and make a plan, then figure out, when you want to share with them. I think we did it with like ice cream or something. I can't remember if we had. I know we had.
I'm sure there were treats, because it was part of a family home evening.
Yeah,
and so
we had
always
a treat.
have family home evening treats.
And we did do it at a time where like normally we get together and talk about stuff, So it wasn't just like, hey, we want to talk to you about something. Although that's fine too. We already have that established where we're all together and we talk about stuff. So it didn't seem like, oh no, we're going to get some special crazy news about, something. So anyways, that's the homework. Yeah. So if you guys share with your families and share with your kids, we'd love to know how it went for you and what things worked for your family, because we are by no means experts at this since we only shared with one set of kids, which are our own. And so if you send us a DM on social media, Clark and Linda, we'd love to share your thoughts and how it went for you, and maybe it can help some other people, or even just throw comments down on iTunes or Google Play, maybe on how you were able to share, if that helps somebody else. We're just trying to make sure other people can know that there is hope out there, and that, we're all struggling. We're not perfect.
Yeah.
So,
Are we done, or do we want to keep talking about anything?
I think we're good. Are you good?
I'm good. I didn't know if we wanted to talk about stuff that we've been doing ongoing since then.
Oh,
Because you had
okay.
brought the 30 days of sex talks.
Okay,
And,
so since he just said that, we may as well just throw it out there. You guys are like, what? So P.S. This is bonus
we're so
material.
well prepared. Can you tell?
So we've started this 30 days of sex talks.
It's taken us much longer than 30 days, but
Yep.
we do
We have
occasionally
a bookmark. It's
go
not
through
even on
them.
there.
And
This one's for ages 3 to 7. There's another one that's ages 8 to 11, and then I think there's like a teen one as well. Anyway, it's just like really cool books. It talks about educate and empower kids. We just got it from Amazon, and we'll throw the link in the show notes or below the video, and you guys can check it out. Read over it before you read it to your kids, just to make sure it's the level that you want them to understand what it is that you're talking about with them. And then the other one is My Body is a Gift from God. This one is by Cherie Adams Christensen. And she talks about, permissions with your body, and, how it's our own body, and that we need to protect it and respect it. And, it doesn't just talk about pornography or abuse, but it talks about, keeping your body clean and healthy and sleep and exercise. So it's really good. It just kind of helps kids understand a little bit more, like, that their body is theirs and that they can treat it well. So those are some books that can help out too. So,
and there's other resources out there too. But I think I just want to, and I know we already said it, and hopefully you're not getting sick of us, but I just wanted to reemphasize: don't view your disclosure with your kids as like a one-time, hey, I'm just going to get through this and it's going to be over and done with. I think it's a topic that needs to be revisited, and they need to have updates on your recovery and how you're doing, and that can help motivate you. Like, remember, like, hey, I'm doing this for my family, I'm doing this for my wife and my kids, and I need to return and report to them regularly and tell them how things are going, and continue to have those talks and ask them how they're doing and things like that. I don't think it needs to be, something that you're constantly pushing at them, but regular check-ins, I think, are really healthy and key to helping protect your family.
Yeah, because kids want to feel safe too. We always talk about how the betrayed needs to feel safe, and it totally makes the kids feel safe in knowing that, their parents are working together to keep their family together and healed and recovering. So, yeah. Well, thanks for listening and joining, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks.